In another century, another universe perhaps, inventor Elsa von Freudenfeld revealed her uranium-powered energy-producing device to the world. Her device, called the Nucleum, was well received by King Frederick Augustus II of Saxony, and the technology was soon incorporated into the country's industrial pursuits, ushering in a new era of energy and prosperity. Years later, you and up to 3 of your friends will compete to become the most successful industrialist by building and powering buildings, securing contracts, and achieving goals set by King Frederick Augustus himself. Hey everybody, I'm Spencer with Game Nerds, and in this video I'm going to break down everything you need to know about Nucleum from Board and Dice before you add it to your cart. I'll cover the turn summary, main mechanisms, player count adjustments, comparisons to similar games, target audience, component organization, and the estimated time commitment. But first, let's get started with the game objective. In Nucleum, your objective is to earn the most victory points. Points are recorded on the tracker bordering the map and can be earned by completing contracts, meeting milestones, and constructing and delivering power to buildings. Before you can power buildings, you must first create networks, or cities with your developments connected by rail lines. You must also generate power, either via coal or the Nucleum plants, and be able to deliver the energy to the buildings along connected rail lines. Because improvements require an increasing number of resources, you'll need to upgrade your income to have a steady flow of workers and cash, and build mines and turbines to increase your production efficiency. Each player also manages one of 4 unique experiment boards, each of which contains 8 technologies specific to that experiment. These experiments are chosen by players during setup and offer a little variety each time you play. Now, when you play Nucleum, there are no rounds and there are no phases. Players simply take turns in a clockwise direction until the game is over. I'll get into how that happens in just a bit, but first, let's take a look at what happens on a turn. And there's a lot going on in the game, but you only choose one of 3 things to do on your turn. Play an action tile to the top of your player board, play an action tile to an empty railway space, or perform a recharge. The action tiles contain a mixture of the actions in the game, and depending on what you choose to do with them on your turn, you can end up doing one or both of the actions shown. The actions are urbanize, pay for and place a building on the map; industrialize, pay for and place a mine or turbine on the map; develop, gain additional action tiles; contract, collect a new contract to work towards; and energize, power buildings to gain benefits and endgame victory points. When placing an action tile on the map, you can take actions if you match the colors on either end of the tile. Also note, if you match the color of another player's tile, they'll get to do an action as well. These railways are essential for growing your networks and being able to transport coal and uranium to power your buildings. Playing action tiles above your player board is also important, as you get to do the actions and increase your income potential for when you recharge. The income tracks work in a grid-like fashion. As you increase your income throughout the game, these markers move to the right, but you don't automatically get the highest number you've revealed. Instead, you only receive the number as far along as you have placed action tiles. If you've increased your money income to 9, but only have 2 action tiles placed, you'll only get 7 coins. And that's the case for each of the categories on your player board when you choose to recharge. You get the quantity indicated for money, workers, and victory points. You also calculate how many achievement tokens you've received from powering buildings and other sources. Take one of your milestone markers and place it on a number equal to or lower than that total. You can't have more than one of your tokens in the same section. The last thing you'll do when you recharge is to remove your action tiles, and they become available again. This means that you once again have to fill your player board with action tiles, so that the next time you recharge, your income is decent. You can see that even though your initial choice for your turn is pretty limited, the follow-up decisions can begin to snowball, and I haven't even covered each individual action in depth. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. I just think it's important to convey that what you're doing in the game is very layered, like an onion, and if you think about everything you can do and need to do all at once, you could start to get overwhelmed, especially if you aren't used to this sort of game. But those layers do allow you to think in layers, and that can help you better organize your thoughts. I don't know, that's my approach to the game. I'm 100% defeated in my plays of Nucleum, so maybe there's a better way. To be fair to myself, the scores were all pretty close. The game will continue until a certain number of endgame conditions are achieved. 3 in a 2-player game and 2 in 3 to 4 player games. There are 5 potential endgame conditions. The action tile draw piles are empty. Both contract draw stacks are empty. All players have recharged 3 times. At least one player has unlocked all 8 technologies, and at least one player has reached 70 points. This means that many variables will impact each game's trajectory, leading to an indefinite number of turns every session. When it comes to player interaction, you might be surprised at how much is present here in Nucleum. Almost every element in the game can be impacted by your opponents. They may take the action tiles you want. They may build rails that prevent you from connecting your network to a specific city. They may take the contract tiles you want. There's also a race to be the highest milestone marker in each section on the sideboard. You'll also be competing to power the neutral buildings placed on the board during setup. The list goes on. However, you can benefit from your opponents too. If they're in need of the energy produced by your turbines, they'll have to pay you to be able to use them. All of that to say, you have to take your opponents into account when deciding what to do. Anticipate how they may try to block you, and pay attention to their strategy so you can potentially block them. Let's move on to talk about the target audience for Nucleum, and we'll begin with complexity. On BoardGameGeek, it has a 4.04 out of 5 complexity rating. I'll do my best to place it on a scale of games with similar weights and mechanisms. It's a little bit more complex than, say, Newton and Darwin's Journey, other games by co-designer Simone Luciani. I'd also consider it about equal to Brass Birmingham, which many people have compared Nucleum to. I haven't played Brass, please stifle your boos, so I can't comment on that comparison. However, I will say that most people will find it less complex than some of co-designer David Turksey's noticeable titles like Tekenu and Anachrony. Barrage is another game that people are comparing Nucleum to, but I'd say that Barrage is slightly more complex. If you've never played any of those games, none of that helps you. Just know that it doesn't come close to the complexity seen in games from Vital Lacerda like Lisboa or Kanban. When I played Lisboa for the first time, I'm pretty sure I couldn't make my brain think for at least 3 days. The mechanisms in Nucleum are pretty straightforward, but the complexity comes from a sometimes overwhelming amount of choice, and how both your decisions and your opponent's decisions will continuously impact your available choices as the game progresses. That being said, this game is going to be well received by people who enjoy making and improving efficiency engines and weighing multiple decisions at once. There's a little bit of racing to beat your opponents too, so expect some confrontational situations as well. However, it is possible to play a mostly friendly game, especially if players request that playstyle from the beginning. Just say, hey, let's all agree to do what's best for ourselves and try not to intentionally do things to mess each other up out of spite. Easy enough. This is definitely a game that needs 100% of your focus, so noisy and chaotic playing environments are not ideal. Also, you really need to be paying attention to what everyone is doing, because you may have a plan, and it could easily be rendered impossible because of an opponent's action. Strategize as the game goes along, and don't wait until it's your turn to assess the state of the board and come up with a plan then. Trust me, your friends will thank you for that. Oh, and you don't have to have friends with you to play Nucleum. You also don't have to have friends, because there is a well-developed solo mode included with the game. Know that this isn't just a deck of cards and half a sheet of additional rules. The solo mode is explained in a separate 12-page rulebook and explains how the automated player, the Baron, takes the various actions. It's not a simple beat-your-own-score mode. This Baron is only one step away from complete sentience, so you'll need to play your very best to be able to beat the Baron's score. If you want additional challenges, the game also includes a challenge sheet with achievements of varying difficulty to unlock. Finally, let's look at the suggested age range. The box says 14 and up, and I can't disagree with that. I can't really agree with it either. Sure, I guess some 14-year-olds could figure it out, but it really comes down to, do they want to? I definitely would advise playing against Nucleum with anyone younger than 14, though. Now, something I don't usually comment on is how game components fit inside the box. In the case of Nucleum, there are around 600 individual components, so I figured I could offer a few suggestions. Board and Dice included this universal organizer in the box, and you'll have to look up instructions for how to assemble it. I have to give props to BoardGameGeek user Elias for his solution. Everything has a place, and the boards fit nicely on top. However, if you want an efficient setup process, I'd recommend not using the organizer at all and rely heavily on plastic bags. Put all components for each player in a bag. You can also separate some of the components by experiment so you don't have to sort through them every time. The more you can separate the components into individual bags, the better your setup and teardown experiences will be. The time investment for Nucleum is probably going to be a big determining factor for you. For starters, you could easily spend 20 minutes on setup alone. Setting up requires you to be very particular about which variations of common components you use and how many of them to include or keep out of the game. For example, there are regular action tiles and base action tiles. You have to sort out a certain number of regular action tiles to mix in with the base action tiles based on the number of players. You'll find similar instances of this with the contract tiles. Putting hundreds of components in their exact places just takes time. Organization is essential if you want to cut down the setup time. The time spent teaching the game is going to vary greatly depending on your explanation style. I tend to explain only what is necessary to get playing and then teach new concepts as we get to them. Using that method, I spent 10 minutes explaining the game, but 15 minutes is more likely if you're more thorough. Once everybody understands what they're doing, turn length averages about 1.5 to 2 minutes. However, total game length is less certain. Since the end game is triggered when a certain number of conditions are met, the decisions players make impacting those triggers could vary from game to game. Strategies that are hyper-focused on refreshing or the technology tiles will ensure those endgame conditions are met more quickly than if players spread their focus more broadly. This explains why the printed duration estimate on the box has such a wide range, 60 to 150 minutes. In my experience, games will be on the higher end of that window. Player count will play a little bit of a factor here, but the duration does not increase exponentially at 3 or 4 players, thanks to the player count adjustments and the universal endgame conditions. I also want to mention that teardown and put away time is significant, at least 8 to 10 minutes depending on your organization method. All in all, you're looking at a total time commitment of 2 hours minimum, with 2.5 to 3 hours being more likely to set up, teach, play, and put away Nucleum. Although not the most complex game out there, Nucleum does offer enough of a challenge to players who typically enjoy heavier games, while still being accessible to those who are looking to break into the next level of difficulty. If you enjoy resource management, route and engine building, and achieving lots of goals, you will most likely appreciate what Nucleum has to offer, just as long as you have the time and table space. And that's everything you need to know before you add Nucleum to your cart. If you have any questions about the game, feel free to leave me a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. To add Nucleum to your board game collection, head over to GameNerds.com where you can find it and several of the other games mentioned in this video. I'll link to them in this video's description. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please consider giving it a like, and make sure to subscribe to the Game Nerds channel so you don't miss out on future unboxings, breakdowns, tutorials, and more. Once again, my name is Spencer, and I want to thank you so much for watching.